I wanted to create one more tutorial video here kind of covering the mobile workflow, but I wanted to show the entire workflow start to finish. So I'm going to create an entire mobile application for the Android platform. I'm going to use Flash CS5 to do that, and I'm not only going to make the app, test it on my device, but also publish it to the Android store and download it onto my device through the Android store, so you can see the entire process start to finish. So this is my design that I will be importing to Flash. Before I jump over to Flash, I wanted to just mention that on our videos website, there are a couple of videos that cover creating the development environment for building a mobile application. I'm not going to spend a lot of time showing how to set that up. I'm just going to dive right into the development. So take a look at, more importantly, this part 1 that shows you actually how to test directly on a device when you're building a mobile application. Well, I'm going to hop over into Flash, and I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to choose the Air for Android template here that is actually installed when you install the extension from labs.adobe.com, covered in that other video. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to save this application down to my desktop. I'm going to call it Restaurant Guide. You'll notice this is set up to be kind of a portrait design, and I actually want to do a landscaped version of the application. So I'm just going to click Edit. I'm going to make the dimensions 800 by 480, 30 frames a second. The dimensions really don't matter, but I am targeting an Android device, and these are the kind of the dimensions a majority of the Android devices support. So I'm making sure everything will be sized correctly when it shows up on the device. Next, I'm going to import my design. File import, import to stage. I'm going to choose the Photoshop file. I'm going to make sure I get some of those hidden content layers. I don't need this background layer. And I'm going to click OK, and everything should show up positioned perfectly in Flash. Now all the content layers are showing. I'm going to jump to my timeline for a second and just collapse those so they aren't taking up space. Hide them as well. What I need to do first is make each of these panels into a button. So I'm going to start with the first panel. I'm just going to select all the layers so all the content on those layers is selected. Modify, convert to symbol. I'm going to make this a button symbol, and I'm going to call this button 1. Nice and generic name here. I'm going to click OK. It collapses all the content onto one layer now that it's a symbol. So I'm going to actually move that layer out of my layer group here and delete all those empty layers that I don't need. And I'll rename this, call it button 1. I'm going to repeat this process for the 3 other buttons on screen. I now have all 4 panels converted to buttons, each on their own layer, and I also gave each one an instance name of B1, B2, B3, B4. Just short instance names to keep the action script a little smaller. The last thing I have to do before I can work on the interactivity is convert the content to one big movie clip, because I'm going to animate it fading in, and I would rather just have it be one big symbol. I'm really going to do the same thing. I'm going to select all the content in this content folder here, modify, convert to symbol. This time it's going to be a movie clip. I'm going to call this content 1. Again, everything ends up on one layer because it's just one symbol now. I can move that somewhere else, call it content 1, and actually trash the layer folder with all the empty layers in it. I'm going to repeat this process for the rest of the layers as well. I now have all 4 pieces of content converted to movie clips, and I can now start adding a little bit of animation and interactivity. And as I said, this is going to be real complicated. I click on a button and I just want to fade in this first piece of content. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually extend out all my layers, maybe 60 frames out, just kind of arbitrarily picking that amount. Content 1, I'm going to have this show up at frame 10. The rest of them are just going to kind of stagger maybe about every 10 frames for now. So I'm going to move these all over 10 frames. So 10, 20, 30, 40. Now content 1, I want this to animate fading in. So I'm going to actually right click in the timeline and create a motion tween. Frame 1, I'm going to click on my content and have the alpha be 0. At frame 19, so just before that other one pops in, I'm going to click on the content and have it be an alpha of 100. There's just a nice animation of it fading in. I'm going to hold the shift key and resize this animation. That keeps that keyframe in the right spot, but now this animation is only that long. I need to repeat this for the rest of the movie clips. I'm going to do that real quickly by right-clicking and choosing Copy Motion on that animation. Right-click and choose Paste Motion. So I now have all three of those fading in at different frames. Now each time they finish fading in, I'm going to actually need a stop action so that they don't go on to the next page. So I'm going to add an actions layer and put a keyframe by hitting F6. Open my actions panel and add a stop action. And repeat this process for each frame, putting a keyframe, adding a stop action. I now have stop actions in all the correct places for each piece of content, so my last task is to wire up the buttons. I'm going to go to frame 1. I'm going to use the code snippets to do this. So I'm going to click on this first button. I'm going to go to my code snippets panel, and in the timeline navigation there is an option to click to go to a frame and play. So I'm going to double click that snippet. It actually copies that snippet into my timeline with a big comment. I'm going to actually get rid of the comment. Remember, this is saying b1.addEventListener. When button 1 is clicked, call this function, and this is a really ugly function name that it made. So I'm going to actually rename this function. I'm going to call showContent1. And I actually want to go to and play frame 10 because that's where the first piece of content shows up. Now I need to repeat this for all the other buttons, and instead of going back to the code snippets panel, I'm just going to copy this and paste it. All 4 buttons are now wired to take us to the correct frame. Before I test this, I'm going to add one more stop action to the first frame because I of course need to be stopped on the first frame for the user to do something. You'll see if I roll over, I get the active cursor. When I click on one of these, I see the content for it. So I actually just need to add a way to get back to that first frame. I'm going to do this real easy. If you click anywhere, it'll take you back to the first frame. What I'm going to do is copy and paste the events one more time. This time I'm going to add it for the stage. I'm going to call a function called goHome. This will go to and play 1, but I don't want to actually play frame 1, so I'm going to say go to and stop frame 1. Now the problem is this will conflict with the other events that are firing because, of course, clicking a button is the same as clicking the stage. I'm going to be a little tricky, and I'm going to add the word true in here, and basically this is going to make this event fire first. Now I can just click anywhere, and it goes back. Click, return, click, return. So I'm about ready to test on a mobile device. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my file and go to my Error for Android settings. This is going to output an APK file, which is the Android application. I'm going to call this application Restaurant Guide. I need to give it an app ID. I like to use com.easelsolutions. Whatever the name of the application is. I use all lowercase. This just needs to be unique so it doesn't conflict with any other apps on the device, and a way to make it unique is to use your domain name. It's called reverse domain notation. This is going to be a landscaped application. I don't want this to have auto orientation, which means it'll rotate when you move the device. I want it to stay as is. I could add in additional options here for any extra files I want to include. I'm going to actually jump to the icons. I'm going to associate a couple of icons with this. So for the 36 by 36, I'm going to browse to my icons folder, and I've already created icons for each one of these. You notice they really have nothing to do with this. It's just a person running, mainly because that was the first icon I found here. But maybe this is which restaurants you want to run to because they're so good. I need to assign some permissions and basically allow this application to have access to certain parts of the phone. I'm going to say internet access. It really isn't going to do anything else, so I don't need to worry about adding access for any kind of storage or anything like that. Lastly, the deployment tab. I need to make a certificate to sign my application. So I'm going to hit the create button, publisher, Easel Solutions. I'm going to put this exact same thing for all these other options because they have to be filled out. I'm going to make up a password for this certificate. Need to make sure it's at a 25-year validity period. And I'm going to save it to browse to the location on my desktop where I have this saved. It should make the certificate file successfully. I'm going to put in the password, have it remember it. And as I said, this is going to be a device test right now, so I'm going to say test the device release. Go ahead and hit publish, and this is now going to make the application and publish it to the device. I'm going to turn on my device, and you can see now that the restaurant guide is running on the device. If I click any one of these, content faded in, I just have to tap, go back. I have a nice little reference app right now. But this isn't good enough because I would have to load this onto every single person's computer. What I'm going to do instead is upload this application to the Android marketplace. If we take a look at my application directory, you'll see it made an APK file, which is really just a zip file of all the content. In a web browser, I'm going to go to android.com/market. This is the Android marketplace. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and it says, if you are a developer, learn about publishing your application here. Now I'm already logged in, so it took me directly to the publish home. You need to actually create an Android marketplace account. If you want to publish to the marketplace, it's a one-time fee of $25. You don't have to pay this fee until you want to publish to the store. You can test on as many devices as you want. This is actually in comparison to the iPhone developer program, which you have to pay $100 every year and have to pay that fee before you can begin testing at all. And that's what's kind of nice about Android. It's a cheaper barrier to entry. I'm going to choose to upload my application. I'm going to choose the APK file that I had just exported. Hit upload. It's going to verify that it's the right kind of file and set up correctly. You need to upload at least 2 screenshots. You also need to include a high-res application icon. Of course, want to make this look better if you are trying to market your application. There's some additional information. I need to give it a title. I'm going to call it Fake Restaurant Guide. These are all fake restaurants. Few more pieces of information. I need to indicate what type of application this is and what's the category. So I'm going to say it's entertainment. This is appropriate for all audiences. There's some additional contact information. But finally at the bottom, I'm going to accept all the agreements and hit publish. You'll now see that I have an application and it's published. So let's see what this looks like. I'm going to turn back on my webcam here. So here's my phone again. I've already uninstalled the app that I had installed. I'm going to jump over to the restaurant guide and search for it in the Android marketplace. Now this takes normally anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes for the application to actually show up in the marketplace. But if I come and search here and I start typing in restaurant guide, it's kind of hard to see on here, but what you'll see is right here is the fake restaurant guide. I can click on that. It's a free app. I can see the details. I can see the screenshots that I had uploaded. That looks great. Read about anything that I want here, but ultimately I can install it. I'm going to hit OK. It's now downloading, and you'll notice I can see it downloading in my application bar here. It's installing. Just want to show you, if I go to my applications and I go down to restaurant guide, which was actually the name that I had put in my config file, I can start that up, and there we go. Turn it sideways, click on an app, see the details, click on an app, see the details. So it didn't take me too long to be able to produce an application, put it in the marketplace, and begin my mobile development career. Hopefully this helps get you started here for doing mobile development.